Alrighty, I've sewn 1/4 of an inch on the top, and you can see how I Frankensteined the heck out of this lining here. I Frankensteined it like crazy with Shapeflex, but that's fine because that's what it's designed for. Go ahead and we'll turn it over nicely, and then we'll turn it over again. So if you're going to use a marker, a chalk marker is probably a lot smarter than a friction in this case, because your friction will die when you put the hot iron on it, so you lose your marks. All right, so I've folded it over. It's flush at the bottom, but you can see from the top that it pulled in nicely from the top. Now I'm going to put in my elastic. Okay, let me see if I can move this. I just want you guys to be able to see this well. Here's my elastic, and here's my little lines here. This is where this comes in handy. I want my elastic between both my, fashion outside and my lining. I want my elastic to sit here, right? Not on the back. I want it to sit here. So what I'm going to do, I want it to sit up to the top of this crease. So here is my crease, and I can I'll make a friction so that you can see where I'm talking about. That's the top of my crease here. And I want to put my elastic, I think I'm going to put I want my elastic on the top of that crease. But I've got my 1 1/4 inch marks here. Let's go ahead and make those. Let me make a 1 1/4 inch here. And I'll make another 1 1/4 inch. So it'll meet, it will be the same. It'll be the same as this mark. It's up here. It just gives me a way to put this thing together. Take your elastic and put it right there. And we're going to have it above the crease. I want to make sure I'm right with above the crease. I think I am, but who knows. And I'm going to kind of put it here. And then I'm going to move it over here, okay, and put that on your 1 1/4 inch mark above the crease. So what is that? Make sure I've got my crease mark right. So when I turn it over, when I turn this over, my elastic is correct. My elastic is above that crease, and it's exactly where I wanted it to be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go to your sewing machine, and I want you to tight stitch it, and I make a bunch of runs just here. Okay, and I do a bunch of runs right in here. Don't do anything in here, leave that alone, but just do a bunch of runs here and a bunch of runs here to get this thing down. You can use fashion color in the bobbin as well. In theory, when I sew this thing together, that sew line is not really going to be seen because I'm going to take it up when I go final and sew here. So sew here and sew here, and I'll be right back. All right, I've gone ahead and stitched multiple times on this piece right here. So now you can understand that this kind of gets all jammed up because it's designed to. Now I'm going to create a channel, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it to the right side, and you can go ahead and clip it here. And you can clip it here. It doesn't really make any difference because it's going to really jam up on you and make you crazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to my sewing machine. You're going to pull it taut, okay? Let me take this out. You're going to pull it taut, just like that, all right? And with my sewing machine, fairly large stitch, it doesn't need to be a small stitch, 3 1/2 is fine. I'm going to sew, because I can see, and I'm holding it here, I can feel where, that's kind of where my elastic is right there. So I'm going to go ahead and sew with fashion color in the front and fashion color in the back. I'm going to go ahead and sew a channel. Once you start the sew, you want to get it and then pull it tight against your sewing machine so that it completely opens up into a nice flat maneuver space. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew not here, because if I sew if I sew right here, I could conceivably sew the elastic, and I don't want to. I'm going to come off. I'm going to separate this by about 1/8 of an inch or so, and I'm going to sew past that elastic. What we're doing is we're creating a channel, and this is going to be in the channel, and it's going to fit. I've created my channel. I pulled it taut in the sewing machine, and I've created a channel so that my elastic is inside. And if you notice, remember when I sewed this line here, there is a dead piece of elastic here, and there is another dead piece of elastic here. So all the action is between the lines. Now I need to merge this with my vinyl. I need to merge it all. That's why it's important to make these lines, because you can see how it starts to skew. And you can also see that because, remember when I said the concept is when you cut your lining or whatever at 9 inches, that's the size. That's the size it's going to be. So if you take a look at what this, even though this was cut at 10 inches, the lining was cut at 9. So the final size is going to be 9 inches. So if you take a look here, I'm just telling you factoids. If you take a look here and I go all the way to the top, this is about the same, I've got about the same love affair here going on at the top as in the bottom. I don't have a lot of excess. I didn't think I needed to. I think the bottle will hold nicely with what I've got, but I've got to merge these things together and not make them look ugly. Let me show you what I did on my other one. So you can see how I used another binding right here. That will finish, and that will hold them together so that it will be real pretty on the inside here and very pretty on the inside here. So even though I've got ugliness underneath, I do not have ugliness where the people see it. How do I do that? Once again, you'll have your 2-inch strip. This is your 2-incher. Why 2 inches? Because I don't want a huge binding. I don't need a huge binding. I just need it to work. And I'm going to go ahead and cut it and use this as your template, because you may have made yours taller. I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and leave myself a little bit of room at the top, about 1 inch, 1.25 inches at the top. And I'm going to cut it flush at the bottom, but leave yourself a little bit of gap at the top. Okay, that's your 2 inches. Now let's go ahead, and I've based it on this piece right here, because this piece in your cut may be taller. And so, but I have to get this, I have to get this lining to cover not only this piece, but it has to cover this piece as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and take your lining, and we'll put it wrong sides together, no shape flex, just wrong sides together. Press it. Okay, so now I've pressed it. This is where your lines come in very handy. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take it, and I'm going to put the raw edge. This is my raw edge. Okay, and here's my line. I'm going to go ahead and put it along to the right of the line, because what's going to happen, and I'll use a pin here so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, what's going to happen is these two are going to link up, okay, and they're going to lay next to each other like this, and this is going to fold over, and it's going to merge this piece to this piece. Okay, so let's go ahead . Alrighty, and then we've got this piece, and you can come in from the bottom, doesn't make any difference. I want my excess at the top because I'm going to fold that excess over eventually. So go ahead and you can start sewing from the bottom, and you're going to sew 1/4 inch. Color in material at this stage. It will become material when you go final, but go ahead and sew 1/4 inch here, and you've tightened this up, you've made it on your line here. That's good. Go ahead and sew that. 2.5 is fine, and then we'll go ahead and merge these together. Okay, I've sewn this, and I've sewn it from the bottom, so you'll start to sew from the bottom, and as you come to the top, it gets a little bit wonky. Put in the needle down position. It's nice to just go ahead and straighten it out with your hands like this, okay, and then you finish your sew up in here where you're parallel to your line here. Now I'm going to go ahead, we'll go ahead and iron this over. The reason why is I made this bottle opener larger than what you need because I don't know what size bottle you've got. So you've got a little bit of excess here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off my excess. So how I do that is I will go ahead and, let's see, this way. I'm going to go ahead and cut off this excess because I want this is going to have to fold over, right? So I need to cut, you know, in about 1/4 of an inch. I need to start cutting about right here because what'll end up happening is this then will fold over and be able to avoid that cut. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so that I'll pitch that. But this then has folded over. Turn it over and you can see what you've got. So I've got enough. My binding is going to go ahead and clear my cut line. So I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to pull these together. Make sure that your vinyl is attached to your pocket. You know, this is one piece now. You might be tempted to say, well, why don't you just sew it? Remember, vinyl has no ability to recover. So if you sew it too many times, you're going to be in trouble. So I don't tend to sew it. So I'm going to merge this up and I'm going to put it in the crease of this one. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to merge this and I'm going to put it, here's my crease here. That's my crease, something that looks like that. And I'm going to put it together and I'm going to keep it flush at the bottom. All right. And I'm going to turn it over. And you can pin it. You can pin it once you get into a spot. Remember when I said I had extra, I had a little whiteness here. Remember, I knew and I told you I'm going to cover that up with the binding. There, it's covered up with the binding. Okay, so I'm going to put this, and you can take a needle or a pin. Oh, kitten's crying, kitten's hungry. And I'm going to push this flush. The top gets a bit interesting because the top is where it wants to, skew. So I'm going to put this flush here. I'm going to make a mark here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to put this flush with this crease here, and I'm going to turn it over. And I'll pin it. Okay, like that. And then what's going to happen, all right, is I'm going to have to finish the top of this. Basically what will happen is the top is going to be pulled down like this. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch witchery this a bit. Okay, if I can find my stitch witchery. I'll just put a piece of stitch witchery in there. And this will just hold it nicely. Okay, and then I'll go ahead. Sorry, I keep on bumping you. So what's going to end up happening is when I sew, and I'll go ahead and put a clip in the top here because this wants to, there's a commercial for something like that. Okay. Now, you have your options. You can go ahead and you could go ahead and sew it, do a sew job from here all the way up, all the way across, and all the way down. But you're going to have to do it again. And so I'm going to show you how I do it where I don't have to sew it twice. But if you're just new to this and you really feel tentative, go ahead and sew it now because then they won't come apart. Okay? Okay, here is my panel. And I've got my middle pocket, my bottom pocket. Now I'm going to make my top pocket. What I've done is I've created a line 1/2 inch Just a ½ inch. Why so little? You did 1 inch down here. I did 1 inch down here so I could get my D-ring piece on, but I did a ½ inch here. Why? Because I need a fair amount of room to make this thing fit. You know, it's really dependent on, let me do that. It's really kind of starting to be dependent on, I don't want it too squeezy up here. So I give myself a ½ inch down there, and that's going to be enough. So what I'm going to do is I've made my ½ inch line, and you're smart too, is when you make your ½ inch line here, do a measurement from the top of your piece. Remember, this piece was folded over and creased nicely. Do a whole, you know, do a 1 here to your line, and that's reading 11 inches here. And on the other side, it is reading 11 inches. So I know that visually, I'm going to be straight and not wonky, because it's a pain in the butt. If you're wonky, it's very sad. So what I'm going to do is take your piece here, okay, and I'm going to go ahead and put it on your line right over here. Put it flush with the side. Okay, go ahead and clip it just to get it on. Okay, so I've clipped it just to hold. Let me put a smaller clip because I don't want that big clip. I don't want this big clip to make a big mark in my vinyl, but a small clip won't be too bad. Go ahead and put it here and put it on the line. And you can, if you like, you can do a pin here. Don't want to pin through my vinyl. That would be sad. And now what I'm going to do is, remember, I made another line on the other side. And again, that's important because this is, you know, if you didn't make the lines, good luck on trying to figure out this one. This is going to be painful. So what I've done here is, here's my guideline. Here's my line that we've drawn. Pull this out about 1/4 inch from the end. Okay, so here is my line, and here is my edge of my bag or my panel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and put a pin in, and I think you're going to understand as I play with this thing. Go ahead, move it up, put another pin in. Here is my this piece right here, and I'm going to offset it about 1/4 inch from the edge. Let's get a pin that will work. Go ahead and pin it. All right, and now what I'm going to do, don't make any wrinkles. Okay. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew from here. I'm going to sew down here, okay, and then you know, down to here. Don't do anything. You know what we're going to do here. We're going to make this into a bag, but just leave it for now. We'll fight it out in just a couple of seconds. I've gone ahead and sewn the side here, and it doesn't really matter what color you're going to use because it's going to be covered up with a binding. I've left this alone because you're going to build it. And now I'm going to go ahead and sew this channel right here. Let's go ahead, and I've got a little extra right here. Let's go ahead and trim that. Okay, so that looks good. Now what I'm going to do is, when I get to the machine, sorry, I'm going to beat you all to death here. When I get to the machine, I'm going to go ahead and sew in the fashion color. I'm going to sew up, I'm going to sew over several times, and I'm going to sew down. Then we're going to put the binding on. But I also want to build the binding that's going to finish this. So here is, let me scoosh this back a little bit. Here's a 2-incher. Okay, and I want this, you can tell that this is completely one piece. I think one piece looks good, but I've got a little excess on each side, so I like that. Take the 2-incher, take it wrong side up, put the wrong sides together, iron those. And let's say you're playing with a fabric that's 2.5 inches or whatever, and you say, ooh, it's too big, it's too fat. Take it to your cutting board, and what I will do is, just to make sure, because I really don't want a big thick binding on this. All I want is a binding that is reading no more than an inch. So this is reading no more than an inch. Let's build the pocket. Okay, you know how to do this, but the bottom here is about right. Okay, so now what you can do is you can go ahead and take it to the machine if you like and do just a very small, very wide stitch, you know, a 3.5, just to seal this down. Okay, and you can, that makes this a little bit easier to work with. So you can go to the machine, don't go over in here, we'll only hit this thing one time. So go ahead and take it, but very narrow, not even 1/4 of an inch, as narrow as you can reasonably make it, because my binding is going to hold up on that. So go ahead and just sew this pocket down, and then we'll trim this. Alrighty, I've gone ahead and just done a gentle sew right in here, just a very narrow seam allowance and everything, fairly large stitch, and I like this. I haven't even played with this yet, but we're going to play with this in just 2 minutes, and we're going to put a binding on this. I've got excess over here, so let's go ahead and trim that. See if I can do this with that. We've gone ahead and finished this, and what I've done is I've put a 2-inch and I folded it on the line here so that we can bind this up, and you can see what I've done right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew a 1/4 of an inch right in here, and sewing the stitch length 2.5 is fine. And then what's going to happen is I'll press it and I'll press it up. So then what you're looking for is you've got a really nice binding that doesn't impact too badly on, you're not losing a ton of space in terms of, you know, when I put my water bottle in, if I had a really big binding, I'd have much less room to put my water bottle in. That's why I don't like a really thick binding. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll start to pull this thing together because we're done with the outside. Alrighty, your outside is done and everything. Now what we're going to do is we're going to trim. So trim any excess that you have right in here, and we'll go ahead and trim, and we'll tighten that up a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start to put the backing on. And the backing was your, hold on just for a second. The backing was your other purple that has been shape flexed only. Remember this one, you're a little late now, but this one had the pell on, and this one just had plain shape flex. We'll go ahead and turn this over, right? And then we're going to go ahead and put the backing on. And because you've cut it pretty precisely, hopefully, this is going to fit very nicely. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and use a bunch of Wonder Clips, and then I'll start to, I will also then apply the strapping, and I'll show you how to do that in 2 seconds. Your back panel is on, and you can see it right here. That's your back panel, that's on. This is your front. I'm sorry, this is upside down, but I'm trying to give you an idea. Remember, your purple fabric was cut at 26 inches long, both of these pieces right here. Your pell-on was cut at 25 inches long because I wanted to give a crisp, you know, fold so that I could fold it in very crisply and very nicely. What I'm going to do is, now that my backing is on and it's been sized and it's fitting nicely, is go ahead and take your iron, get my iron here. Blah! Okay, take your iron and go ahead and iron that back on top of that front. Why? Because then they're going to marry up pretty nicely together. Then what I do is I take them like this, fold the back nice, fold the top nice, and now I have an equal fold on both sides. It just makes it a little bit easier to do that. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you, let me go ahead and reposition my camera. I'm going to show you how to do the D-rings. For your D-rings, this is where you can use some stash fabric if you have it, or you should have extra leftover little pieces of fabric if you have that as well. But what I've got is I've got some cute stash fabric that I think will complement, won't be too obnoxious. So what I did was I cut this about 6 inches, 6-ish inches Yep, 6 inches wide. This is about 2.5, not too big. And then what I did was I shape flexed the inside, the wrong side. Then I turned it up like this. And then what I did was I'm using my 1-inch D-ring. You can turn it up again if you like, and then just go ahead and start sizing it, to see if this is going to fit well. And this should fit well. Now, I need a little bit more stability in here. So instead of using webbing, which is thick and very heavy, not very heavy, but it's very thick and substantial, you've got a lot of Pellon left over. Remember when you cut all your Pellon? Your Pellon comes in a 20-inch width, and you only cut the Pellon for the bag, or for the panel, at 17. So you've got 3 inches of Pellon to play with. So you can use and exploit that Pellon. And what I did was I cut a strip of Pellon 1 inch wide, put it in the center of this little piece right here, fold it up, and then I folded it down. And it doesn't make any difference. I don't care that I've got a raw edge in here, because when I fold it and finish it, this is not seen to the public. And then what I do is, and I think I did this in prior, but go ahead and you can put a little bit of stitch witchery in there just to fuse it down, and then go ahead and fuse it down. Take it to the machine, and you need to stitch, just edge stitch here, and you'll edge stitch here. 2.5 stitch length is fine. You can use any color in the top. If you're going to do it like this, just make sure that your purple is in the bobbin. Okay, and then go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay, I finished that, and I've used cream in the top, but I used purple in the where this public sees it, so that's good. And you're saying 6 inches seems like a lot. Why are you using so much? Because I'm making 2 D-rings. So take it, cut it in half, and now I have 2 D-rings. Take this. I use a little bit of stitch witchery in here, because I want to fuse this down so I don't have it twist or get off mark on me. So I put a little bit of stitch witchery in the center, pull my D-ring in, pull my D-ring down, and I'll pull my D-ring taut, to pull it tight. And then I'll go ahead, line it up, make sure it's on top of each other, and then I'll go ahead. What does that do? What that does is that just fuses it, just all shades of fusing. And when I go final and I go sew this into the bag itself, it will be nicely done, and it doesn't coming out. So do the same on this side. And then what I'll do is I'll show you where to place these. Here is my bag. And so what we're going to do, and here are my D-rings. So you can put one of them aside, because one's going to go up on the top, and then one's going to go down on the bottom. This is why I left an inch opening right in here, because it makes a nice place to put my D-ring. So I kind of like my D-ring, I think, on the left-hand side. I don't think it makes a difference, to tell you the truth, but I just do. So I put it on the left-hand side. So this is the left-hand side. So I'm going to turn it toward us here. And here is the opening that I have. And you can use a friction pen just to help guide yourself. That's the opening that I had between my bottom pocket and my middle pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mark here where my inch was. Yeah, okay. And then take your D-ring here. Hopefully you can see that. You take your D-ring, and I'm going to put it in between those marks. And I'm going to offset it. I'm going to put it out a little bit, because I've given myself enough inches. Remember, I did 6 inches. I don't need this to be, I can accommodate this being about like this, okay? So that is where my D-ring is going to go. Alrighty, that's my bottom D-ring. Now what we'll do is let's do the top D-ring. Let's pull this. Let me make you crazy, and I'll pull this like this here. This is your top. Let me see if I can rearrange my camera a little bit better. I know that this is measuring 17 inches across, okay? So by my math, that means that 8.5 inches, and I'll use here is fine, 8.5 inches should mark center. So let's mark the center of this. So that's 8.5. I'll do it in my chalk liner. That just marks center. It doesn't do anything more than that. But my car seat, my headrest of the car seat, those struts, those struts on the headset, or on the headrest, I guess, are about 8 inches apart, okay? 4 inches this way and 4 inches this way. So I want to make a 4-inch on each side gap. So here's my middle. Let's do 4 inches here. This is going to tell me where I'm putting my D-ring and where I'm putting my other thing. Here's 4 inches here, my strapping. Okay, so that tells me, here's my second D-ring. This is why I don't do a binding at the top. I do a binding from here all the way around the bottom up to here. How much binding do I need? I need about 70 inches of binding to finish it from the top right to the top left. I don't bind the top here. Why don't I bind the top? Because if I bound the top, what would happen is I'd have to put the D-ring like that, and then it would have to pull itself up like that. That's very bulky and it's hard, and I don't like it. Okay, so what I do is I don't put a binding on the top. I'll just clean finish this, and I'll put my D-ring like this, put it on center, okay, and then go ahead, and it doesn't need to be deep in there. I've given myself enough when I made that 6-inch run, okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and put that like that. Now when we do the strapping, that means that this never had to bend. This stayed up, and I like that. So my strapping is going to be the same principle. And let's go ahead and let me show you how to make. Let's do the strapping first, okay? All right, you've got your 2 3/4 inch stripping that I told you to cut. And I'm going to go ahead, and I think I'm going to do a little bit of a video and try to insert it in here somewhere that talks to you how to efficiently cut this purple fabric so that you can get all your strapping and all your pieces in. But it's 2 3/4. How did I figure out 2 3/4? You have 1 inch strapping. And so to figure out how much purple you need to cover the white is you have 1 inch. So that's 1 inch this way. Okay, that's 1. 1 inch on the back side. That's 2 inches. Then I have a seam allowance of, I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So a 1/4 inch on the top, that's 1/4. 1/4 inch on the bottom, that's another 1/4. So now I have 2 plus a 1/2 inch. All right. And I add then 1/4 inch extra for ease of cloth so that I can shove this in this tube, because this creates a tube that I can cover this in. If I don't add that 1/4 inch, it will be too tight. You can't go with 2 1/2. You've got to go with 2 3/4. It's the same principle as if you were going to do a 1 1/2 inch strip. That's a very popular size. I use that all the time. 1 1/2 inch strip, let's do the math. 1 1/2 one way, 1 1/2 the other way, that's 3. A 1/2 inch for both your seam allowances, that's 3 1/2. And then a 1/4 inch for extra so that you can shove it in there and it'll fit. So that's the mathematical process, so fairly simple. Take this piece, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure these, and these will be my measurements, and then I'll cut this to fit my strapping that I need. I've cut my 2 straps, and I've cut a top strap and a bottom strap. My top strap is tinier. My top strap is only 24 inches long. My bottom strap that goes around the base of the car seat is about 54 inches long. This is all pretty negotiable. I think what I absolutely need is about 20 inches, but 24 gives me a little bit of extra fun room. Okay, let me explain and I'll show it to you on this one here is about 24 inches, and that goes around the top of the car. The bottom piece, this one here, is 54 inches, and that goes around the bottom. of the car seat, or the seat of the car. Okay. So what I've done is I've cut these. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut my fabric the size of my webbing. Why? And do you need to add a little bit of extra? No, not really. You've got, remember, if I needed to fill in any gaps that I may have, I've got Pellon, and I can go ahead and kind of fill it up with Pellon. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Why do I do it this way? Why didn't I just make a huge run of purple? Because I will not use all this purple. There will be 10-ish inches that I won't use. And if I make a full tube of it, then I've got a tube of 10 inches that is kind of a useless tube. Whereas I leave it in the flat, it's not so useless. I can use it for something else without having to pick it out. So I'll go ahead and use my webbing as a guide, and I'll go ahead and put it. I don't have much extra here. I have this much and this much. I don't have much extra, but that's okay. Any gap that I may have, I'll fill it in with some Pellon. So do this on both your 24-incher and your 54-incher. So I know it's Nitnoy, but this was the extra that I had left over, and that's a helpful piece of fabric. I can put that aside, and that will make D-ring holders or all kinds of other things. So this is my 2 3/4. Take your pieces here, or iron them together, right sides together, just like that, and sew a precise 1/4 of an inch right here. Doesn't need to be particularly short. A 3.0 is going to be fine, and color of thread is immaterial. Okay, I've sewn that, and I've sewn it with a 1/4 inch, and I've got one color in one and one color in the other. Make sure that when you're sewing it, make doggone sure that after you finish you sew it, turn it over to make sure that you caught your raw edges, because it is not uncommon to think that you've caught them and then you turn it over and you have not caught them. In fact, one area in here, right in here, I was fine until I got right there. And so I'm very close here. I'm danger close. So what I did was I went back through it and did another stitch line to make sure that that works. Now you want to turn this into a tube, but everything else I think I caught. You want to turn this into a tube, and let me go ahead and bring my stuff out and we'll talk about how to tube turn. I do a ton of tube turning when I'm making purses, and I do just lots and lots of tube turning. So I have what's called, I want to say it's called fast turn tube turner or fast tube turner, something like that. And I think you can still get it on Amazon. Not cheap. I think they're running at least $50. But this is a wonderful device, and I'm going to use this, and I'm going to show you how I do this, because it has the pullers, the little wire pullers have a little pigtail. A little pigtail that grabs that fabric and pulls it out, and it makes it into a tube. If you're doing it old school, then take your piece here. Let me separate my pieces here. You take your piece here. You've already sewn it. On one end only, you're going to sew a 1/4 inch or so. You'll just sew another sew line right down here. Then that creates a barrier, and you take kind of like a chopstick and you start pulling it through, and then sliding this kind of like a sleeve. You're sliding this over this chopstick. Another option for you instead of a chopstick is a dowel, a long dowel. That will go ahead and turn it. And so you can get a good job out of that. You can make that work. But because I do this so much, I use my fast turn tube turner, and that makes short work of it. And let me show you how I do that. You've got it. It won't. My big one won't go in. My big one won't go in. It's just a little bit too big for my big one, but my smaller one, my next one will. So I'm going to put this in. Wait a minute. Let me open up my door. You're going to shove it in. Try to do it too, if you noticed. Here's my join. Make sure that when you're doing it, what makes it efficient is I'm going to start to be pulling from this end. So I want as much of this free and clear as I can. If this join were like right here, I wouldn't want to do it because it's very difficult to pull it through the tube with a join. I have to pull the join through, and that's a pain. So I'll try to put, if I had a join up here, I would start with this piece so that my problem area is at this part of the tube turner, and I have a clean turn at the top, because then it turns well. You'll understand this more. But here's my join, and my join is not going to impact. It's just a thing. Another reason why I don't do the whole run of it is because it just gets too bulky on the tube. The tube can't handle that much, that many inches of fabric. So I'm going to put in my pigtail, and I'm using the orange pigtail. Pull it in and twirl it around the top here, and you can see what I'm doing, and then I'm going to start pulling. That's why if I had a join right here, it would really be hard to pull it through, and it wouldn't like it at all, and you run the risk that if you really yank it, you can hurt that pigtail, and I don't want to hurt that pigtail. So I'm going to go ahead and pull until it comes out, unscrew, lefty-loosey, and pull it through. Okay, and do that same on the other side.